Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I, Trevor May Tricksbreaker, the man that many people call a disinformation agent, but in reality, I'm just your average scumbag trying to navigate through the fuckery, shittery and cuntery being thrown my way in all fucking directions by a bunch of pedophile, elite and unelected parasites trying to destroy our lives and country. Decided to put this lengthy video together in an attempt to help you overstand a small portion of the biggest scam ever perpetrated at our parents', grandparents', children's, grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's expense. Much of the information being presented in this 40-minute video is borrowed from the book entitled Meet Your Strawman and Everything You Want to Know. I highly recommend that you purchase this book and read it in its entirety, so without further ado, I hope this information resonates. I don't see how it wouldn't. I'm also using the voice of an old British man because he gives me a super calming vibe, and I find that his voice makes information much easier to digest, especially when dealing with this much fuckery at one time. Originally, in England, the unit of money was called £1 sterling. That was because it was literally sterling silver weighing £1. As it was quite difficult to carry several pounds weight of currency around with you, it was arranged that the actual silver could be held in a bank, and a promissory note, which was essentially a receipt for the deposit of each pound of silver on deposit, was issued. It was much easier to carry these banknotes around and to do business with them. If you wanted to, you could always take these notes to a bank and ask for them to be cashed, and the bank would hand you the equivalent weight of sterling silver in exchange for the notes. Today, the currency in America is banknotes, which are certainly easier to carry around than metal coins. But there is one very important difference. These notes are issued by the private company called the Federal Reserve Bank, which is as good a name for a company as any other name. However, if you were to take one of their banknotes to a branch of that company and ask for it to be cashed, all that they would do is give you another note with the same numbers of credit printed on it, or alternatively, other notes with smaller numbers printed on them. This is because, unlike the original banknotes, there is nothing of any physical value backing up the banknotes of today. They are only materially worth the physical paper on which they are printed. It actually gets worse than that. What happens most commonly nowadays is that they do not even bother printing those pieces of paper. Now they just tap some numbers into a computer record, or if they are old-fashioned enough, they write the numbers into a ledger by hand. What do those numbers represent? Nothing at all. They have no actual value, in other words, just as much value as if you type them into your own computer. Quite meaningless. And yet, a bank or other financial institution will merrily lend you those numbers in return for years of your work, plus interest charges. Now, isn't that really generous of them? Actually, this is not at all funny, because if you don't keep paying the money earned by your very real work, they will attempt to take your house and possessions away from you. This won't happen if you understand that what they lent you was actually valueless. Take the case of Jerome Daley of Minnesota in America. In court, Jerome challenged the right of the bank to foreclose on his home, which had been purchased with a loan from the bank. Jerome argued that any mortgage contract required that both parties, that is, himself and the bank, put up a legitimate form of property for the exchange. In legal language, that is called a legitimate consideration put forward by both parties to the contract. Jerome explained that the money was in fact not the property of the bank, as it had been created out of nothing as soon as the loan agreement was signed. That is, the money does not come out of the bank's existing assets, as the bank is simply inventing it. And in reality, the bank is putting up nothing of its own, except for a fictional liability on paper. As the court case progressed, the president of the bank, Mr. Morgan, took the stand and admitted that the bank, in combination with the privately owned commercial company called the Federal Reserve Bank, created the entire amount of the loan in credit in its own books by means of a book, keeping entry, the money and credit coming into existence when they created it. Further, Mr. Morgan admitted that no United States law or statute exists which gives him the right to do this. A lawful consideration must exist and must be tendered to support the loan agreement. The jury found that there had been no lawful consideration put forward by the bank, so the court rejected the bank's application for foreclosure, and Jerome Daly kept his home debt free. That is exactly the situation with all American mortgages. When someone makes an application for a mortgage or any other loan, the applicant's signature is required on the application form before the loan is approved. The signature on that signed application makes it a valuable piece of paper which the bank can deposit in its accounts as a credit to the bank for the amount of the loan. The bank could just keep that application form and stay ahead by $100,000 or whatever, but they want more, much more. They want the borrower to pay them that same amount again, funding it by years of labour and not only the amount of the supposed loan, but significant extra amount in interest as well. Why do you think that they are so keen to lend you money? They're even willing to lend to people with very poor credit, as there is no way that the bank can lose out on the deal, no matter what happens. This is why, if a company starts demanding payment of large sums of money, you start by asking them to provide the accounting for the deal. In other words, you are asking them to show in writing that they provided something of genuine worth as their side of the loan contract. As they invented the money as numbers in their books, with no real worth attached to those numbers, they are in deep trouble as they can't comply with your demand to see their accounting for the deal. Did you ever wonder how the average bank manages to make hundreds of millions of dollars profit every year? When any business is being run, the accounts are recorded as money coming in and money going out. For a bank, the money coming in is called a credit, and money going out is called a debit. The objective is to have these two amounts always match each other for any customer. This is known as balance. Not everything done in banking is immediately obvious to the average person, so it may be a little difficult to understand how everything works in this area. The United States Corporation is a private company. The non-federal Federal Reserve Bank is a private company set up in the year 1913, as is every court and every police force, and even Congress is a company and not a person. Just in case you are not aware of it, the purpose of any commercial for-profit company or corporation is to make money for its owners and shareholders if there are any. The people who you think of as the government don't do anything that earns money. They instead take money from you, and their main job is to make sure that you don't realize that they are in the same position as a company like IBM or Microsoft, which takes away millions of your money every year. So why all the pretense of there being a genuine government which you elect and who serves you? They don't want you to understand that they are just running a company which produces nothing of any worth, something like a betting shop where almost every customer loses money, and wake up to the fact that, unlike what you have been told all your life, this is all optional and you don't need to play their rip-off game any longer unless you want to. They want you to be so burdened down with paying the money and working so hard and so long that you don't have the time, money, or energy to stop and think about what is happening to you and your family. They are desperate to stop you from just walking away from their scam, so they make every effort to connect you with the fiction which is called your strawman. Because fictitious entities like commercial companies can't have any dealing with a real man or a real woman. They can only deal with another fiction like your strawman, and it is essential that they fool you into believing that you have to act on behalf of your strawman, which you don't. They have a number of well-proven methods of distracting you and keeping you from figuring this out. They want you to see a great deal of entertainment, not because there is anything wrong with entertainment, but while you are being entertained you will not be asking awkward questions. Also, they are very careful that most entertainment reinforces their make-believe world and makes it appear to be the real world, where everyone is under the government. A world where police officers uphold the law, taxes are essential in order to keep things going, and things which are said to be bad for you are taxed heavily, not to make money, but supposedly to encourage you to avoid those things. You will notice that they keep saying that their invented statutes are the law, which they most certainly are not. But if they say it often enough, people start believing it and never think to question what they say. They also have another very effective technique, and that is fear. They want you to be afraid of imaginary terrorists, afraid of disasters, afraid of new diseases, afraid of foreign countries, afraid of the economy doing badly and inflation rising. If you doubt this, then take a look at the news and count the number of positive, uplifting news items and the number of negative or depressing news items. It doesn't take much in the way of research to see the very heavy negative bias in the news. The reason behind this is to make you feel that you need a government and an army to protect you from these supposed dangers. It is easy to keep the news items biased that way because all of the major news agencies and media outlets in the world are owned by only 5 or 6 privately owned commercial companies. So to supposedly connect you to the straw man which they created for you when your birth was registered, they use the legalese technique of conning you with the name of the strawman. If you are ill-advised enough to go to a court, which is a corporate place of business, as the accused, you will be asked to confirm your name, quoting the full name shown on your birth certificate, which is the legal personality. Titles such as Mr., Doctor, Reverend or whatever are not asked for as they are not required. The accused is actually the legal personality, which is the name on the birth certificate. So when they ask for the person's name, they are talking to the legal personality, the strawman, and not to the human. This is because a human cannot exist in the legal world. Only pieces of paper can, and that is something which they are very careful not to tell you. This is a really key issue. Natural law and common law are the only laws which apply to humans, and they deal only with harming other people or causing them loss. And outside of those restrictions, a human has free and unlimited entitlement to do anything he chooses which complies with these principles. As opposed to this, acts of Congress, statutes and statutory instrument contracts do not apply to the human, but only to the piece of paper which is the legal personality which has no reality. As the legal fiction, the legal personality, was created by the company called the United States Corporation, that company gets to say what the rights and duties for that piece of paper are. When a person is born in America, the mother and father submit a birth certificate registration form, which is a piece of paper. There is no requirement under common law to do this. When any limited company or corporation is set up, there is always a certificate of registration in order to create its legal personality, and that is a piece of paper. Please note that an American birth certificate states quite clearly that it is not evidence of identity, meaning that it has nothing to do with any human. Marked on it is US copyright, showing clearly that it does not belong to an individual and was created by the state. This act of registering a child makes that child a ward of the court, and the child can be taken away from the parents at any time. The legalese definitions of words which sound commonplace can be found in Black's Law Dictionary, and the current edition is the 8th. Interestingly, in legalese, you the human are defined as a monster, which shows exactly what the people who use legalese think of you. Charming people, aren't they? Another trick they try to play on you is to imply that a summons is something which you must obey, while in fact it is only an invitation to attend their place of business. They are not inviting you, the man or woman, but instead they are inviting the legal personality to their place of business. And please note that there is a choice, as it is only an invitation. The legal personality is just a piece of paper, a birth certificate created by the commercial company called the United States Corporation. And it is not the human. You can't be forced into a contract, so they have to deceive you into entering into one without understanding what you are doing. They are using deception, as every judge's court is a trading name of the commercial company called the Department of Justice, which does not have a parent company listed, meaning that it is a parent company itself. Legal people, on being shown this company registration, respond by realizing that if this information is genuine, which it is, then the United States has been lawless for more than 100 years, because the whole justice system is being dealt with by a commercial company. Going to court in connection with any civil action is a very bad idea, as the only function of a court is to judge between two parties who disagree and then penalize the loser. The court doesn't care who wins or loses, and the objective of the court is to make a profit for its owners as it is a commercial enterprise, and its purpose is to acquire money from anybody who is foolish enough to attend. If you look at the summons, which is really an invitation to go to court, you will see that it is not in your name, but in the name of the strawman which they are hoping to fool you into representing. When you were born and your parents applied for a birth certificate, they did not understand what would happen when they did. Upon acceptance of the registration of your birth certificate according to the local authority, two events happened. 1. Your parents lost ownership of their baby you. 2. They allowed a strawman to be created. This is not something which they can be blamed for, as nobody told them it would or even could happen. Nor did anybody tell your parents what a strawman is or how it can be used against their baby. In actual fact, the registration is a contract which is in reality null and void because there was no full disclosure by the local authority, nor was there intent to contract on the part of your parents. The registering of a baby's birth passes ownership of the baby to the local authority, and that alone, allows the local authority to take the child away from the parents if they ever want to do that. This applies until the child reaches the age of maturity set by the current legal statutes. Doing that is not lawful, but after the birth has been registered it is legal, and there is a world of difference between those two terms, a difference which it is very important that you come to clearly understand. So, what is a strawman? A strawman is a fictitious legal entity, created with the hope that as the child grows up he will be fooled into believing that he is actually the strawman, which he most definitely is not, and pay all sorts of imaginary costs and liabilities which get attached to the strawman by con artists. How is a strawman created? Well, the mechanism involves that unnecessary birth certificate which the parents imagine is about and belongs to their baby, neither of which is actually true. If the baby has been named James's and the family name is Martin, then you would expect the birth certificate to have the name James Martin printed on it. If that is what is printed on it, then all is well, and it is a genuine birth certificate and nothing more. However, if any other name is there, then the document is not a birth certificate, but instead is the creation of a strawman masquerading as James Martin. The alternative entries might be any of the following examples: James Martin, Mr. James Martin, Martin Mr. James, or anything else which is not exactly James Martin and nothing else. Why create a strawman? The answer is, in order to charge the strawman imaginary costs and penalties and fool the human James Martin into paying those amounts. These imaginary charges include income tax, council tax, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, road tax, import tax, value-added tax, fuel levy, loan interest, bank charges and anything else that full-time professionals can think up, and are confident that you will not notice that you never agreed to pay and don't need to pay. Legalese is a secret language invented to trick you. It uses English words but attaches secret meanings to those words with the sole intention of stopping you from believing that what they are saying to you has nothing to do with the normal meaning in the English language. Their purpose is to cheat you and rob you. For example, they will ask to you, "Do you understand?" In English that means, "Do you comprehend what I'm saying to you?" And the automatic response would be yes, meaning, "I do comprehend what you are saying to me." But these sneaky, underhanded people have changed the meaning in legalese to mean, "Do you stand under me?" meaning, "Do you grant me authority over you so that you have to obey whatever I tell you to do?" What makes it even worse is the fact that they will never tell you that they have switched from English to legalese, and if that is not dishonest, underhand and unscrupulous, then I doift know what is. If you answer the question believing that English is being spoken, then they pretend that you're contracting with them to become subordinate to them. Whether or not that is actually true is debatable, because that is effectively a verbal contract between you and them, and for any contract to be valid, there has to be full and open disclosure of all of the terms of the contract, and then unreserved acceptance by both parties, and in these cases that has most definitely not occurred. But what is the point in all this? Well, this manoeuvre is intended to trick you into agreeing to represent your strawman. Why? Now that's a good question, but to answer it takes a bit of explaining, and you need to understand the overall situation. All humans are born equal with complete freedom of choice and action. If you live in the same place as a lot of other people, then there are a few restrictions which have grown up by common consent over time. These restrictions are for your protection and the protection of the other people living near you. These restrictions are called the law, or more accurately, common law, and they are few in number and very easy to understand. They are: 1. You must not injure or kill anyone. 2. You must not steal or damage things owned by somebody else. 3. You must be honest in your dealings and not swindle anyone. These restrictions have resulted from hundreds of years of disputes which have been dealt with through using common sense and the opinions of ordinary people. They are the only limitations on you. And if you don't want to abide by them, then you need to go to some isolated place and stay away from other people. Many people think that there are hundreds of other laws which they have to keep, and new ones every other day, but that is not so. Those other things are called statutes, and keeping them is optional for you, the human, but they are not optional for your fictitious straw man. And that is why the people who benefit from those things want to persuade you to represent your straw man, and so become subject to all of their invented restrictions and charges. If you knew that they were optional, would you agree to 1. Give most of your earnings away in taxes and similar charges? 1. Pay to own a vehicle? 2. Pay to own a television set? 3. Pay to drive on roads which were built with your money? 4. Be forced to join the armed services if you are told to? 5. Send an army which is supposed to represent you into another country to murder innocent people there? Were you ever told that these things are optional? If you agree to represent your strawman, then these things become binding on you. These are some of the statutes which politicians keep inventing in order to make you poor, make them and their friends rich, and keep you in a position where you have to do everything they say, no matter how much that harms you and does away with your natural freedom and rights. But, says somebody, we elect a government to represent us, and so we have to do what they say. After all, they have our best interests at heart, don't they? Now, if you were to apply for a loan, mortgage or otherwise, for $100,000 from the bank, they would give you an application form which is set out in such a way that you have to fill in the strawman's name, rather than your own. Separate boxes with one of them containing Mr., and they may even require you to FEI the form in using block capital letters. You may think that the capital letters are so that they can read you writing, or perhaps to make it easier for it to be entered into a computer. But the name in those capital letters belongs to the straw man, and not to you. You have actually just made an application on behalf of the strawman, and not on behalf of yourself. You might wonder why they would want you to do this. After all, what could they ever get from the straw man? Well, you might be surprised. When the strawman was incorporated, they assigned a large monetary value to it, possibly $100 million, and they have been trading on the stock market on behalf of the strawman ever since, and you know how many years that has been. So very surprisingly, in their opinion, the little fellow is really very rich, and you have just authorized them to take the amount of your loan application from the strawman's account. So before the bank passes you any money, it has already gotten its money from the strawman account and entered it in its books as a $100,000 credit to your loan account. They then place $100,000 into your loan account as a debit. Interestingly, that loan account is now balanced and could easily be closed off as a completed deal. This is where the sneaky part comes in. To get the money out of your account, you have to write and sign a check for $100,000 on that account. What does the bank do with checks which you sign? It assigns them to the account as an asset of the bank, and suddenly the bank is ahead by $100,000 because the check is in the name of the strawman, who can supply the bank with almost any amount of money. But it doesn't end there, as the bank is confident that you know so little about what is going on that you will pay them anything up to $100,000 over the years against what you believe you owe them. If that happens, then they have made yet another $100,000 for the bank. To make things even better for them, they want you to pay them interest on the money which you don't actually owe them. Overall, They make a great deal of money when you borrow from them, so perhaps you can see now why banks make hundreds of millions in profit each year. If the loan were used to buy a property, then the bank probably insisted that you assign the title deeds to them as collateral for the loan as soon as the property deal closed. If you then fail to keep paying them, they are likely to attempt to foreclose on the loan and sell your property quickly for an even greater profit. And to add insult to injury, if the property sale did not exceed the amount of the loan, plus the charges for selling it, then they are likely to claim that you owe them the difference. Perhaps you can now see why Jerome Daly told them to go take a running jump at themselves, and why your request for the accounting for any loan made to you puts the bank in an impossible situation.